What's up, family? I hope you're having a wonderful day. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back in to another, I'd say, delightful conversation. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about this idea of mind change and how our minds change. In our Sunday sessions, we're actually getting ready to start this conversation for the next 4 to 5 weeks in a Sunday session series called, you guessed it, Mind Change. But before we jumped into the session, I wanted to share some of my thoughts in advance. All right, so before we do, of course, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell, consider joining our community, consider volunteering in our community, consider financially supporting the channel and the work that we're doing to build community, and check out the merch because, as I've stated previously, it's some of the dopest merch in the game. All right, so let's jump into this conversation. In a world that seems constantly divided, it's refreshing to learn that change is still possible, and that's one of the reasons why I'm still. Or why I'm very much excited about not only this video but the upcoming Sunday sessions, because change is still possible even within our own minds. Recent statistics from Gallup and the Pew Research Center show that Americans are more flexible in their beliefs and opinions than we typically like to assume. And of course, those assumptions come from the way things were, a historical norm, if you will. But historical norms typically do not last. What is considered normative in a society is constantly in flux and in contrast and in conflict. But what actually drives this change? The latest insights from neuroscience offer some fascinating explanations. And so we're going to jump into a little bit of this. So, according to a series of Gallup polls and findings from the Pew Research Center, public opinion on numerous key issues, including religion and spirituality, has shifted significantly over the past few decades. For those of you who are regulars to this channel, you know that I consistently like to take the long view of history as a way of getting a better view of things. Speaking of better view, I do have an upcoming video on meditation that will also be talking about getting a better view. So that's going to be interesting. But for instance, views on same-sex marriages has transformed from majority disapproval to majority approval since the early 2000s. And so as of now, we're talking about, I think the specific survey that one is referencing it was from 2023, so that's in 23 years or less. And this reflects broader social and cultural shifts in the sense that when we change our minds about something that large, and that is pretty a large thing, you go from being for or against same-sex marriages to being like, no, people can get married. That it's normally not just one idea change that leads to that. It's normally not just one thing that leads you there. It's typically almost like a domino effect. And like, even for me, why I don't think I would have ever voted against same-sex marriages. I think not even think, I know for a fact that I promoted candidates who did not promote same-sex marriages. And what led to that change for me had ultimately not as much to do with what I thought about same-sex marriages as it did what I thought about my relationship with God, which had been kind of like that governing archetype, if you will, of me and what I should think and what I should believe, how I should behave, what I should embrace, what I should accept. Which ultimately leads you to attaching your opinions to, number one, shit that has nothing to do with you, and then number two, things that you've not even invested your interest in to learn about, which is incredibly disingenuous, right? But but the big point here is that when you do see these changes typically are dominoes or the result of snowballs, if you will, things that have built up and that have cycled and that have accelerated and that have taken on more things and eventually lead to these type of points, which I find to be absolutely exciting. Similarly, Pew Research reports shift in attitudes on issues ranging from immigration to environmental policies, illustrating a society that is constantly reevaluating its values and beliefs. And I enjoy looking at stuff like this because it is a reminder that things are not as clear cut as we like to think. Sometimes we think this divide is as prevalent, and in many ways, it's really not. But also when you kind of know what's trending, for those of us who are invested in what's happening, in society globally, for those of us who are invested, when we see the trends, it's like a flag to go ahead and say, hey, put some, go ahead and put your foot on the gas. Let's accelerate a little more. We're winning. It's motivation. I encourage people to take a look at the statistics. And in the same way, and I hate to use the word winning and losing, but let's just use the game of life for this situation. So for those of us who are, happy about these trends, yeah, it's like, yay, we're winning. The world is becoming a more safe place, a more liberal place, a more progressive place, and hopefully we can do so in time to perhaps undo some of the damage we've done, and then even even more fascinating for me, create different types of processes, systems, technologies that ultimately improve the quality of life for every person on this planet, and not just for the sake of improving the quality of life of every person on this planet. That is a beautiful gesture, but it's improving the quality of life of every person on this planet so that we can have more people able to be engaged with progressive solutions for our species and the other species that we share this planet with, this planet, our solar system, our galaxy, and beyond. Again, I kind of like to take the long view, but um, so basically, we see a society that is definitely constantly reevaluating its values and belief. For example, if we would have done this, if we would have been looking at surveys like this 100 years ago, it would have been showing that that society was just as in flux then as it is today. What I want to focus on is specifically in religious dynamics. Americans are experiencing notable changes, right? So number one, which is one of the earlier videos I did on the rise of atheism. If you have not seen that video, it is one of my most top performing videos. If you have not seen it yet, go check it out. I promise you, you're going to enjoy that. But there has been a rise in secularism. So, according to Pew Research, the percentage of Americans who identify as atheist, agnostics, or nothing in particular has risen sharply, now representing about 26% of the population. And that's with atheists and agnostics as of, I want to say, as of 2021, had jumped from 2 and 3% to 4 and 5%, representing 4 and 5% respectively of the population, bringing that to 9% for atheists and agnostics alone, which was a significant jump. And just for those of you who are not really familiar with what those numbers means, 9% is roughly 30 million Americans who identify as atheist and or agnostic, or atheist, yeah, atheist or agnostic. 30, roughly 30 million Americans out of 330, and then you also have the non-believers who account for the remaining, what, not 23%, it's the other way, so 17, the remaining 17, 18%. And so then again, that's roughly 60 million. So that's a total of, you're talking about 90 million. I probably could have did that a quicker way. Yeah, that's roughly 90 million. So you're talking about roughly 90 million people in the United States who today do not identify with the religion, do not identify with the specific belief system. And out of that 90 million, roughly 30 million of those people do not believe in a God or claim to know that there is a God at all. That's for those of us, and of course, I've been an atheist for a decade now, but I spent that decade in the closet. But for those of you who have been a part of this, been a part of this life for a very long time, I'd hope that these numbers are encouraging for you. Knowing that, hey, we were once an obvious minority. We are now a growing minority, and very quickly becoming, especially when we combine ourselves with free thinkers and skeptics and non-believers all together, then we are quickly becoming the majority. Um, so there's also been changes in theism. Um, and when I say changes in theism, I literally mean changes in regard to what theists hold to. So the belief in traditional deities has seen a gradual decline, with more Americans questioning the existence of God or interpreting God in non-traditional, non-theistic ways. And so typically, and I say non-theistic, but there's some gray area there. But we've seen this a lot with people begin to say, well, I'm just going to look at the universe as the creator, or the universe as the life giver, or nature, or things of all of these things, which is really a very fascinating phenomenon, because in many ways it's almost a regression. But when you take it off of this just kind of linear progression and put it more so on a spectrum, then it very much well can be a progression instead of a regression. And let me just kind of make that make sense real quick. What I mean when I say it's kind of a regression, again, referencing that video that I did about the rise of atheism, kind of showing sociologically what our relationship to theistic tendencies has been, and what our relationship to religion has been as a species, taking that long view. Then where a lot of people are taking their religious beliefs now is actually where many of our religious beliefs started at. So the people who are going to nature, there was a period in our sociological evolution where our beliefs started with nature, and then we assigned a god to the nature, or we assigned a deity to the nature. And so now regression, in the sense of we're going back um, to taking off the deity from the nature and just seeing nature as the as somewhat of an active force. And that's really where the progression comes from, because even those or many of those who are switching to the viewpoint of nature or the universe don't necessarily reassign deistic qualities to the nature and the universe, which is absolutely fascinating. So it's their ways of doing what the intention was in the beginning, which was to personify these things, to have a useful appreciation of them. Ooh, that makes sense. And so, like, that now has to go into my book for the case for religion. But so you do see like assigning agency is more than just about or assigning personification is more than just about giving ourselves something to worship. It was about ascribing value to something so that we would, in a way, have an appreciation for these things. And unfortunately, superstition turned that appreciation into hyper appreciation, which we now know as worship. All right, so but then there's also, which I've been seeing this one ever since I was still pastoring, and that's spirituality versus organized religion, which that's the best ways to say it, because often people who say that they're spiritual, not religious, it's not religion that they're against. At least not religion in the way that is popularly defined. And I will admit that I don't adhere to the popular definition. And the popular definition of religion, the popular definition, again, I don't think the popular definition is accurate. But the popular definition of religion is basically, this idea of believing in gods. Now, again, that is actually not an accurate definition of religion. But because it is the popular definition of religion, which what you actually see is there are plenty of people who call themselves spiritual who are still religious according to the popular definition, which means they still believe in these religious superstitions. They just no longer believe in the organized aspect. And I actually like to raise a flag on those because really, again, they're not against nonsense, they're against organization. And we kind of need to draw that line and make that clear because there are no solutions to any of our problems without organizing around the problems and the solutions. And that's what you'll find. Many people who say they're anti-religion, it's not that they're anti-religion, they're anti-organization, which means they are averse to being a part of anything that will require any amount of cooperation. Because there's still that thing. Well, I just don't like being told what to do. And because of the fact that many of us were raised in religious environments that were abusive and oppressive, many of us have uh, conflated or correlated the idea of organization with oppression. And so fleeing religion isn't necessarily fleeing nonsense for them or fleeing superstition, it's resisting oppression. Okay. But so anyway, there's a growing trend in this, and people are increasingly, claiming to find spiritual fulfillment outside of organized religion, favoring, and here it is, personal spirituality over traditional religious community. And so this is really more so about individualism, which I don't find unhealthy. I just hope that in that individualism, that of course there is at some point a separation from superstition, and then at another point a recalibration with people, so that we can have healthy communities. Much of the problems that go unsolved because there are people to talk about those problems but not people to organize around them. And I say this as a person who studied social movements. Not that that should mean anything. I'm more so saying that as to give you reason as to why I'm so passionate about the idea of organization. Much of the problems that still exist in my community exist in many ways because we have not organized around those problems yet. And I'm going to push, likely until the day that I die, that we do so. Okay, so and then another one, beliefs in the afterlife, which are beliefs in traditional concepts of the afterlife are also evolving, with some moving away from clear cut views of a good place or a bad place, heaven or hell, and moving to more nuanced, personalized understandings of life after death. Which again, I do find this to be a healthy phenomenon, because in this phenomenon, what you will have ultimately is people who are able to interrogate and investigate their own ideas about religion, about the afterlife, about what could possibly come next, and actually have permission not to need anyone else's approval to think that, and that in itself may be permission to critically engage that more more healthily, for lack of better words. And so these shifts kind of reflect a broader reevaluation of personal and societal values, influenced by increased access to diverse information, greater intercultural exchange, and significant shifts in societal norms. As more information becomes available and as societal norms continue to evolve, so too do the personal stances of many individuals on religious, spiritual, and even political matters, because they're all interconnected, they're all correlated. So where I want to kind of move this conversation to now is in understanding how we change our minds, the neuroscience, if you will, of changing minds. And this requires a dive into the human brain, which is of course a complex organ, always in flux. Neuroscience has revealed that several factors are key in the processing of changing one's beliefs. So the first one, which I find to be absolutely fascinating and have been kind of um, entangled with for the past 5 to 6 years of my life, is neuroplasticity. Um, Neuroplasticity is absolutely mind blowing to me. It's the brain's ability to change and adapt as a result of experience. This can happen in two ways: at the synaptic level, where the connection between neurons becomes stronger or weaker, and also through changes in the number of connections. Ugh. when we're exposed to new information or new experiences, our brain literally rewires itself to accommodate this new data, which can lead to a change in beliefs. Like, that is amazing to me, that our brain literally can rewire itself with new information. Like, I'm not going to lie, I've kind of obsessed about this a little bit over the past few years and have worked to really reprogram how I engage with the world. Like, one of the things I'm like, I don't want to say hypersensitive about, but I don't listen to the radio anymore, because I like intentional information, intentional flow, and I realized that the in a former iteration of myself, I was just very loose with the flow of information into my life. Now I'm very intentional so that I can get new information to create some new connections up in there, right? But there's also emotional influence. So not only just the influence of neuroplasticity, which means your mind is literally changing itself based on new information that it has, but emotions play a significant role in shaping our belief as well. Neuroscientific studies suggest that emotional reactions to information can profoundly impact whether and how we change our minds. For example, if new information about a political issue is framed in a way that resonates emotionally, whether positively or negatively, it is more likely to alter our existing beliefs. And again, this is how we know that emotions are very powerful. Now, I typically try to encourage people, uh, because this is a reality. Emotions do impact us in this way, but I do try to kind of encourage people to move away from that reality, to kind of start working the muscles, working those muscles of critical engagement if you can, because this can quickly become emotional fallacy, right? So what I encourage, what I remind people with, is by saying emotions are for the experience. Emotions are a way for you to measure how you feel about the experience. But we should kind of relegate data to the decisions. Emotions are for the experience. Let the data be for the decisions. Cognitive dissonance, obviously one that we're popular with. The psychological concept refers to the mental discomfort experienced when holding two or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values at the same time or simultaneously. Neuroscience shows that this discomfort is not just an abstract feeling, but a tangible process in the brain that can lead us to change our attitudes in order to reduce the dissonance. So, in the few conversations that I do have with believers, and especially the believers who are either, whether they're being open or combative in those conversations, I'm typically going to do my very best to um, make them aware of their own dissonance, which is not making them aware of the things that don't make sense to me, but kind of helping them shed light or shine a light on the things that the contradictory beliefs that they hold that will likely not make sense to them, because it is often in that uncomfortable place of dissonance that can often result in a person saying, I think I'm on the threshold of changing my mind. And then there's also the role of yeah, the role of the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for higher cognitive functions such as decision making, plays a crucial role in belief change. It is involved in critically evaluating new information, overseeing emotional reactions, and making the ultimate decision to change a belief or stick to the old one. So it's like we have some, for lack of better words, some really good machinery up here that seems to be predisposed to mind change, you know, which is kind of counter this idea that we are set in our ways, which I actually do have a song on one of my projects called Stuck in My Ways. I got to go back to it now. But it kind of runs counter to this idea that we are stuck in our ways. The truth be told, I think as we begin to examine ourselves more clearly, which I will talk about this more in the meditation video, we'll see that our ways are constantly in flux, and And many times the reasons that we do think we're stuck in our ways is because we've limited the scope of perspective of what our ways are to one, two, or three things, these key things that we've allowed to become definitive of who we are, that are not even fully descriptive of who we are, therefore they can't be definitive. Okay, sorry for that little rabbit trail. Social influence is obviously a big one. Our brains are incredibly sensitive to the beliefs and behaviors of others. This is why church is so effective. Neuroscientific research indicates that social context and the opinions of people around us can influence neural processing, making us more likely to adopt prevailing opinions, especially if they are upheld by individuals or groups we trust or admire. And again, this is another one that can often become a slippery slope, just like the influence of emotions. But it is a reality, one that we can often use in our favor, and one that I often talk about a lot when I talk about the need for building secular community, because established community, as it exists, is a social influence. It is a normalizing influence. It's a catalyst in that way, that once you have a few, you see more. But it has to be more than just identifying around a similar label or umbrella of labels, and it actually has to be, hey, we share these labels, but we do these other things together that are beneficial for the community that we're a part of. And that way, it becomes a social influencing factor, which I literally call the social influencing theory, or the social influence theory. That it just that at that moment it becomes acceptable for other people to consider that as an option. I want to use like a crass example here, but I won't. Um, I kind of want to though, because it works. Hey, we're adults, so I'm gonna do this. Like when I was a kid, uh, eating booty would never have been a thing that would have been popular. Or at least not that I knew of. But now, because there are whole communities around booty eating, and who are using their social influence to make songs about it and things of that nature, it's created a norm that makes it easier for people to talk about and makes it easier for people to consider. That's what communities do. That's the power of community. Communities make things visible that were not visible before. And once something is visible, it becomes an option, in the kind of social zeitgeist. And so, yeah. And so, just to kind of close this up, the process of changing one's mind is intricate. It involves a delicate balance of cognitive, emotional, and social factors. And as we continue to learn from both polling data, neuroscience, and even our own personal experience, it becomes clear that our beliefs are not as fixed as they might seem, really shifting us away from this idea that humans are hardwired. It seems more likely that we are soft wired, and then that wiring is enforced by the things that we expose ourselves to, negative or positive. Understanding the dynamics of mind change can not only help us become more open to changing and remaining flexible with our own beliefs and ideologies, but also more tolerant of the shifts occurring in others around us. In a rapidly evolving world, the ability to change our minds is not just a psychological curiosity, it is also often a societal necessity. And so I really hope that I was able to say something in this conversation that is of value for you, perhaps something that makes you think about. Um, Plasticity, the way that we change our minds, the way that we interact with our beliefs and our ideas, and the way that others are going through that process right now, and possibly even a way that you can play an active and an assertive role in helping others come to that flexibility of mind, coming to that fluidity of thought. And so I'm super duper excited, not only about this video, but having this conversation in our Sunday sessions, where it's not just me lecturing and sharing my thoughts, but where we actually get to engage with our community in real time and talk about some of these things. And so, of course, I look forward to seeing many of you there, if not all of you. I can be optimistic, even though I'm not necessarily an optimist. I consider myself a realist, to be sure. But would absolutely love to see you in some of those sessions. Before we leave, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell. Find one of the many ways that you can support this community and the work that we're doing, and check out our freaking merch. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all very much. Until next time, keep rising, stay progressive, stay beautiful. I'll holla at y'all.